Back in the late 2000s, there was this fever dream of a cable TV station called Spike TV, which I'm pretty sure died off a few years ago. And for those of you too young to know what cable is, it was like YouTube, but you couldn't pick what to watch. It sucked. You had to wait for shit to come on. It was basically Twitch, but worse. Anyway, on Spike TV, there aired a show called Deadliest Warrior, which was fucking sick. It'd be like, imagine a samurai versus Spartan hoplite, and then they'd bring in 2 experts on each class of warrior and have them beef with each other, test their weapons in pointless but flashy tests. And then they'd end the show with 2 stuntmen in cosplay out in the park somewhere fighting to illustrate who won. They even put out a video game for the 360 PS3, and it actually went pretty hard. At some point in the show's lifetime, they ran out of cool warriors from antiquity, so they started adding dudes with guns. One was like the IRA versus the fucking Taliban. They were wildin'. My favorite of these gun v gun episodes was the Russian Spetsnaz versus American Green Berets. The Russian dudes had this holster that they really wanted to show off for the Makarov, where the pistol could be stored with an empty chamber and the safety on. You could draw the pistol by pushing straight down through the holster, which would rack the slide and flip the safety off, making the pistol ready to fire. And man, I thought that was the coolest shit. I heard they made them for Glocks too, so when I got a Glock, I actually looked for one, but I couldn't find them at the time. Then, like over 10 years later, I was watching a Forgotten Weapons episode on said holster. Now, Ian is a very well-informed historian, accomplished author, and subject matter expert, and most people would cite him as a credible source. And he proceeds to explain why this thing is fucking stupid. It's dangerous, it has an incredibly limited use case scenario, it doesn't work that well, it's not particularly secure. Like, just use a normal holster and draw your pistol the regular way, you fucking goober. So, just to recap the story here. In the 2000s, I heard about this piece of military equipment that was presented to me as really high speed and I thought was super cool. Then, years later, I come to find out it was actually terrible. Now, calm down everyone. Let me start off by saying, I like the A-10. Hell, I wouldn't be making a video about it if I didn't. But I also like the Fast and the Furious movies, I like cheap Chinese buffets, I like Call of Duty. You can both like something and admit that it isn't great. Now, when I say the A-10 isn't great, I mean the A-10. Like, you know how people will say AK-47, but they could mean an AK-47, an AKM, an AKS, an AK-74, an AK-105, or an AK-12. Like, yeah, technically only one of those is an AK-47, but it's kind of an umbrella term used by the general public. I'm not doing that. When I say the A-10 isn't great, I mean the 1970s built for the folded gap, basic bitch, first A-10 isn't that good. But why? Why would I say such a thing? Well, guess what? Just like the F-35 video, this is actually a history lesson. Get pranked, bitch. So, the A-10 was originally envisioned as a weapon to rip open 70s-era Soviet tanks in a Cold War gone hot scenario, where the Russians would Zerg rush across Germany. This thing would use its cannon to blast its nut all over tanks in the front lines, while heavy bombers would clap the cheeks in the back. Really spit roast the Soviet advance. So, the Air Force thought, cool, we just saw 30mm cannons mounted to aircraft mess up T-54s in the Middle East, let's give it a 30mm cannon. So they put
the General Electric Gal A-10 Avenger, 30mm hydraulically driven 7-barrel rotary autocannon
on the thing. And I swear to God, if I see one comment down there saying, actually they built the plane around the gun, just shut up. I built your mom around my dick. Anyway, after they built the plane, they decided to test it, as you do. In a relatively famous test in the late 1970s, an A-10 pilot was given pretty much the ideal situation to bird it up on 10 tanks, simulating a Soviet tank column. It was daytime, clear weather, the tanks were fully combat loaded and were not moving, weren't deploying smoke, and most importantly, didn't have any anti-air vehicles supporting them and shooting back. The A-10 did 1 pass per tank. It could not have been a more advantageous situation for the plane. And it threw hard. The gun landed 50% of its shots on target, and of that 50%, about a third managed to penetrate the tanks at all. And of the 8 tanks the A-10 managed to even hit, only 3 were destroyed and another 3 were disabled, but fixed and fully operational within 24 hours. Now, the tanks being used were a bit older for the time, patent M47 tanks. Had the tanks been more modern examples for the time, like the Soviet T-72s, which had thicker armor on both the front and sides, it's very unlikely that the gun would have had the ability to hard kill the armored unit. And keep in mind, the pilot was uncontested. In a real-world situation, he might have only had 1 pass, not 10. To be fair, the pilot only fired about 170 rounds for the entire test, and the ammo that was used was subpar when compared to the more advanced rounds used in the Gulf War. So, tank-busting gun that can't bust the tanks of its day. that's not great. But the Air Force kinda already bought the thing, so it was too late to back out now. A decade or so goes by, and Saddam Hussein, before his whole arc, decided to invade Kuwait, and the US didn't like that.
And so, we shall go to war!
Now, in the Gulf War, the A-10 was used. This was like the early 90s, so this is the A-10A, not the A-10C. Iraq had a metric shitload of tanks, and hell, a lot of them were even older tanks. The A-10 should be right at home. In addition to
the General Electric Galt A-10 Avenger, 30mm hydraulically driven 7-barrel rotary autocannon.
The A-10 went into battle with this cool little thing called the AGM-65 Maverick. It's a guided missile that can fuck up any tank, even to this day, pretty much no matter where it hits, and it can be accurate to within a meter. Keep in mind the A-10's cannon is accurate to within 6 meters at an 80% accuracy rate. Modern versions of this missile are fire and forget, which is pretty fucking cool.
Now, back in the 90s, the A-10 couldn't self-guide laser missiles.
It was required to have some dude on the ground with a laser pointer to aim at the target, and then the A-10 shoots and the thing dies. Now, ground lasing had a lot of issues. For example, the dude with the laser needed line of sight on the target. And if the target is, a tank that's, shooting at you, it might be hard to maintain that laser. So laser-guided weapons in the Gulf War fired by the A-10 weren't that good. And the gun, as previously stated, wasn't that good. It could also carry GBU-12 Paveways, a laser-guided bomb, but all the same issues apply.
The A-10 could also carry AGM-65B and D models, which are TV guided and IR guided respectively. Now, the B variants require an optical sensor on the missile to be aimed by the pilot. However, these only really worked against stationary targets. A moving tank would easily defeat it. The IR missile could also be impacted by weather, fires on the battlefield, or smoke deployed by tanks.
Now, the F-117 and the F-111 could both self-guide Mavericks and Paveways on target, and they both did work in the 90s. Way more than the A-10, 1,500 tank kills from the F-111 alone. So with all that said, the vast majority of tank kills the A-10 made, around 80%, were with Mavericks. Now, remember Pierre Sprey? By this time he was taking credit for designing the A-10, which again, he didn't. A man named Alexander Kartveli was the designer of the A-10, and don't let his name be lost to history. Now, the news in America was predictably caught up in the war, and Sprey started making sure every time someone talked about the A-10, they talked about the gun. Sprey and the other members of the fighter plane mafia thought that an over-reliance on technology was going to doom the military and, by extension, America. They claimed the A-10 was a cannon fighter, a plane built around the gun, and that giant blender of doom was its best tool. Meanwhile, the F-117 and the F-111 were some fancy pieces of high-tech junk that had no place in war. The US needed rugged, battle-proven World War II weapons. This romanticized version of the A-10 and its guns still prevail to this day.
We made it up. We made this one up. It's a made-up tale. It's a total fabrication. It never happened. This one was invented by a writer. Not this time. It never happened. It's false. It never happened. It's a fake. It's fiction. It's an urban legend that never happened.
This is where all the memes come from. You can actually hear me roll my eyes when I see a Reddit comment talking about how the gun on the A-10 is the only thing it needs to do its job. Truth is, the A-10 was the silver or maybe even bronze medal vehicle of the Gulf War. On top of its inefficiency against the more modern tanks, its role as a close air support weapon, assisting ground forces under fire, had a lot of issues. The situational awareness of the A-10 at the time was non-existent. Pilots would be forced to fly very low and use binoculars or the old Mark I eyeball so they could try and see the situation on the ground. Now, when you're about to dump 30mm autocannon rounds at something, you should be sure of what you're shooting at. The A-10 is responsible for more blue-on-blue incidents than any other aircraft in US history, while
the General Electric Galt A-10 Avenger, 30mm hydraulically driven 7-barrel rotary autocannon
might not be good against tanks, against lighter support vehicles, entrenched infantry, or buildings, send it. Problem is, if you are close to the enemy, such as say when you're calling for close air support, the inaccuracy of that cannon might hit you instead, either due to the margin of error on the gun itself, or because the pilot is squinting from 3,000 feet up and might mistake you for the baddies. Remember, on paper, only 80% of the rounds will land within 6 meters of the target.
and another 20% will land outside that radius. Because of this inaccuracy and the lack of ability to positively identify targets, the A-10 had a habit of lighting up the wrong people. This happened at a disturbing rate, as many as 9 times between 1991 and 2006, resulting in the deaths of British and US service members as well as the death of civilians.
Be advised that in the 3122 and 3222 group box, you have friendly armor in the area, yellow small armored tanks. Just be advised. Shit! Got the smoke. Hey, pop off 3-4, abort your mission. You've got, looks like we may have a blue-on-blue situation. Alright. Blessed. Pop 3-4. Fuck. Pop off 4, this is Manila 3-4.
So, the A-10 got an upgrade to the A-10C. The A-10C got shiny new toys like a fucking targeting pod, perhaps the most important piece of military aviation hardware since radar or the fucking jet engine, to help spot ground forces and self-laced targets. It also got an upgraded ECM or electronic countermeasures pod to help jam enemy radar, GPS navigation with JDAMs to go with it, helmet-mounted targeting, night vision, and upgraded Maverick missiles. Worth noting, the A-10 can carry something like 16 weapons on its pylons, making it an excellent bomb truck. The A-10C doesn't suck. It still requires air superiority conditions and enemy anti-air radar missiles to be neutralized, unlike the F-15, F-16, or F-35, which can perform CAS missions in a more hostile environment. But it certainly has its place. All I know is if I wanted close air support, I'd probably be okay with it showing up. It's better than nothing. An Apache would be better though. All that aside, we can still talk about all the little neat things that make it a cool plane, even if not the best plane. When the cannon fires, there's actually enough force to cancel out half the thrust of the engines, not that it fires long enough to do so. The gas from the muzzle of the cannon can also cause the engines to fail, so they're constantly reignited when the cannon is burning. And yes, the front landing gear is offset to the right to make room for the gun, which is also slightly offset to the left, so the firing barrel is perfectly centerline. The landing gear is also a bit on the taller side, and the engines are mounted high, so it can make use of forward operating bases where there might be dirt runways. Worth noting, the wing-mounted landing gear wheels don't fully retract, meaning for whatever reason, if they're stuck in the retracted position, the plane can still use them to land. It has a redundant two-sided hydraulic system, so if one system fails, the other system can still work half the control surfaces of the plane. It has the famous titanium bathtub that surrounds the pilot and can withstand up to 23mm autocannon fire. It has 11 hard points for aim-night sidewinders, hydro rockets, GBU-12s, 38s, 39s, and more recently GBU-53s, and as stated before, it can carry the AGM-65s. The upgraded C variant can carry the Lightning targeting pod and the upgraded AN/ALQ-184 electronic countermeasures pod. Okay, history lesson over. Now, let's get into why you all decided to show up. The A-10 in gaming. Also, when I say A-10 now, I don't mean the A-10, I mean any A-10. So yeah, it's in a lot of games. I mean, like I said, it's a very popular aircraft when you don't know how ass it is. I narrowed this down as much as I could, but we still have a lot to cover. So, let the thing begin.
Jet! The one that goes BURNT!
You're a spineless, pale, pathetic lot, and you haven't got a clue. Somehow I'll make a man out of you.
Last time I made one of these videos, VTOL VR came out on top, And if I'm being completely honest here, this entry on the list is my personal favorite. But it's not really an A-10, so I guess it makes sense to put it on the bottom of the list. Don't get me wrong, this is still a very good A-10 analog. The AV42C Kestrel looks more like a tiny Osprey than an A-10. It was the first airframe in VTOL VR and also where the game gets its name from. At a glance, you wouldn't think A-10, but hear me out. It has high-mounted engines, dual vertical stabilizers, carries everything the A-10 can, including
the General Electric Gal A8 Avenger, 30mm hydraulically driven 7-barrel rotatory autocannon.
Or it can be equipped with a smaller gimbaling 30mm autocannon. It can also carry the AGM-114 Hellfires or cruise missiles. Like the A-10, it notably lacks a radar, but it has an integrated targeting pod. It can obviously also VTOL, and because of that, it uses a collective style throttle rather than a traditional horizontal one. It has all the necessary equipment for catabar operations, and has a troop bay in the back for transporting infantry. Another big difference is it actually has afterburners, and it also has an RCS or reaction control system. These are used mainly in hover mode to help with stability and maneuvering. Much like the A-10, it is best suited for ground attack in air superiority conditions, troop insertions, extractions, or medical evacuations. It is everything the A-10 is, but so much more and so much better. I give it a...
Bud, your negative energy is seriously bringing me down.
Oh, I hope it is, Bud. You come into my house, take my money, and nail my wife? Are you fucking kidding me?
I'm gonna stick up my hand and say that was uncool, bud. My bad. Seriously.
I have a complicated opinion of GTA Online. It's a very good sandbox that allows you to play the game however you want, fill whatever role you feel like. But everything costs money. Hell, you even have rent and bills in this game. And much like another game we're going to talk about in this video, it can either be a pretty soul-breaking grind for your cash, or you can admit defeat and hit up the online store. I was very lucky though, because in 2015, while playing in some random public lobby, a very nice hacker gave me some money. And with that money, I've been able to just afford whatever they put in the game. I'm basically a GTA trust fund baby. How much money, you ask? Well,
enough.
In 2018, GTA released an update that included the B-11 Strike Force, which is the patented GTA, pretty much an A-10. And it's very close, closer than the Raiju and the F-35 are. Biggest change they made was the tail, opting for a more traditional rear of the plane rather than the dual vertical stabilizers. The wheels also fully retract into the pods, unlike the real one, which leaves them exposed. But other than that, it's an A-10. The weapons on the wings are actually more well done than most mounted on other jets. It has 6 air-to-air missiles, 3 on each side, which actually disappear when fired, which is something that is rare in GTA. There's also a missile barrage mode that fires from the hydropods, which is cool. Both styles of missiles, however, are the super slow standard GTA type deal. It can also drop bombs, but from an internal bomb bay. Not sure how that even works. And it can deploy countermeasures. Worth mentioning too that there's several liveries you can slap on the thing, with a few of the traditional faces that appear on A-10s in the real world. Now, let's talk about my big issue with this thing, and that's the gun. Most of my issues with the A-10 are the gun in general anyway, but in GTA it's for different reasons. See, the base game had 2 jets. The Laser, which is an F-16-ish type jet, and the Hydra, a Harrier type deal. Now, both of these jets have dual explosive cannons, and the rate of fire of them is insane. The guns are by far more useful than the missiles. So when the hot gun plane gets added, you might think the gun would be even better than the legacy jets, right? This was such a disappointment. It seems like the rate of fire is either laughably slow, or only 1 in every 10 rounds is an explosive one. If you want something to do ground attack in GTA, the Laser or Hydra are much better. The Hunter will even beat those, and the Avenger is by far the best. As for the B-11 Strike Force, I give it a...
Okay, guys, stack up.
They said not to wait up. So you reckon that the rainbow sprinkles are the way forward with the donut?
Absolutely, because then you get the different textures between soft donuts.
Could you two
and
get your
crunchy
asses over here
sprinkles.
right now?
Did you lose something, Sarge?
You drop something, Sarge?
This is supposed to be a stealth mission.
Why?
Ah, never mind. You're here now. I need you to breach that door.
Oh, charades! I know this. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Hang on,
Is it a musical?
No, it's gotta
No?
be, it's a book. No.
You know, the more I learn about Battlefield 2042, the more I like it, honestly. I saw footage of the A-10 being used in the game, but it took some figuring out on how to activate it. And it turns out you can just turn Battlefield 2042 into Battlefield 3, which is a game I played the hell out of back in the day. For some wild reason, you have to go to a website to set this up, which, okay, weird call, but you do you. Anyway, once you do this, you can make the A-10 a vehicle that's playable. It has the cannon and some Hydras. Hydras seem to be able to take out walls too, which is pretty useful. Just like on the F-35, you can customize the loadout, but the default Hydras are by far the best thing. The Mavericks are god-awful. They have such a small window for you to lock onto tanks, and they barely do any damage. This thing should be killing tanks in one hit. I'll be honest though, I can't feel any difference in how it handles when compared to the base game's F-35. It's a nice little set dressing. You can do the gun runs, you can do the rocket barrages. Honestly, I don't have much to say on it. It's an A-10. I'll give it a...
ストライダー2はどこだ？誰か？
彼女の帰還はこの日、この瞬間だったから。
この未来を与えてくれたパイロットに感謝を。
I was originally going to do this section on Project Wingman, a game I do want to cover in this series one day. Sadly though, I found out while an A-10 was planned for Project Wingman, it was cut. I guess you can restore it via mods, but I decided to just table it for now. So, we're going back to Ace Combat. The A-10, as far as I know, has appeared in every Ace Combat game. I could be wrong about that, let me know in the comments. It's mostly been an A-10A, but in Ace Combat it's the A-10C for the first time. Not that any difference between the A and C are featured in the game mechanics-wise. It can carry dumbfire bombs, which suck, Hydras, which are okay, and Mavericks, which are the best. The model of the plane looks spectacular, but for some reason the cockpit view feels incredibly claustrophobic. The A-10's cockpit doesn't have a clear view to start with, and on top of that it feels like the FOV for the cockpit might just be a tad on the narrow side. This might be a trend for Ace Combat in general, so that and the cockpit design might just lead to a rough experience. Ace Combat is best played in third person anyway, in my opinion. In the last video, I talked about how most of the planes feel the same in Ace Combat, but damn was I wrong here, I can feel the difference. This thing is incredibly slow, which hey, I guess that's kind of accurate. It stalls in the climb very easily if you don't push the throttle. It carries the base game general purpose Sidewinder, 2 of them even. Now the gun, even when in third person, doesn't have that industrial vibrator sound to it, and it's kind of pathetic. It sounds like a lawnmower next door.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
Like, you had one job, do better. If I had one more gripe to throw on, the 2 general purpose missiles, which again are supposed to be AIM-9s, are mounted on each wing, and it doesn't take advantage of the asymmetrical loadout it uses in the real world, which would have been a nice touch. Anyway, the A-10 in Ace Combat, from me, gets a... Arma 3 actually has a vanilla A-10. Well, kind of. It's the A-10 if they updated it for the 2030s, which I guess means they made the engines more boxy. It kind of looks like the Cybertruck. I know it looks stupid, but I dig it. They call it the A-164 Wipeout, and it's one of 2 base jets in the game, the other being a new stealthy version of the Hornet. As far as the A-10 goes, it's not half bad. It has an integrated targeting pod that sits right under the center of the plane, which is kind of video game logic, but super useful as you can look behind the plane with it. Not only can it carry all the usual A-10 things, but with mods you can even give it Hellfires, and those things on the A-10 rip. The targeting pod also has a PIP, or predicted impact point, for bombs on the gun, which is incredibly useful. I touched on it a bit in the F-35 video, but the way they handle targeting pods in Arma is both cool and not great. To use it, you have to activate it, and it takes up your entire screen. You can then move the camera around, zoom in and out, lock the camera gimbal, etc. Now, you can still control the aircraft when that's happening. and it even gives you a roll indicator in the corner. However, you have no pitch indicator, and if you're zoomed all the way in, tracking targets or providing surveillance, you can lose track of your altitude and crash into the ground before you realize what's happening. This could be fixed very easily by simply adding a pitch indicator or duplicating the HUD in the corner, but as far as I know, this kind of mod doesn't exist. There is an altitude reading on there too, but in the heat of the moment, it can be hard to read or tell if it's going up and down. Also, like in Ace Combat, there's just one sidewinder on each side. I know this is fixable through mods though. Flying this thing again to get footage for this video really made me miss being a CAS pilot in the base game Wipeout. On the off chance that you have an Arma unit that's looking for a fixed wing CAS pilot and you would let me fly this, please hit me up. I'd love to get back in the seat of this jet. Anyway, as far as the A-164 Wipeout goes, I rate it a... I want to start off by saying I am not a War Thunder player. I played it way back in like 2013 for like a month. I thought it was kind of neat, but it was all World War II stuff and it lost my interest pretty quickly. Over the years, I watched it from afar, hearing about all the classified document leaks, controversies, and drama. I don't fully understand the situation, but I have heard World of Tanks or Warships is less problematic. Unfortunately, World of Whatever doesn't have any planes and doesn't have the A-10, so here we are. Now, there are two A-10s in War Thunder, both being A variants. There's a free one called the A-10A Late that you can grind for, which is actually a bit better from what I hear, or a premium one, which is also an A-10A, just not late. Last video, I said I didn't feel like spending money. Well, today, I did. It's honestly not a terrible rendition. I was actually pretty impressed. The weapon selection is varied, and I was actually kind of amazed about how much you can customize the pylons. Sadly, only on the A-10 Late, which I don't have, you can have the two sidewinders on one pylon, so at least we finally see that. Now, since it doesn't have a targeting pod, guiding the AGM-65s can be tough using a built-in seeker for the TV-guided version of the missiles, but when they do hit, they're very effective. Hydras are also an excellent choice. The gun, from what I saw on the test range over Wake Island, was pretty true to life, to my surprise. Strafing the tank target with the cannon resulted in most of the rounds hitting the dirt or causing little damage. Now, I decided to take this thing into a random arcade air battle with nothing but the aim-9s and the gun, and wow. This thing ripped it up in the few games I played. I had my VR on and HOTAS set for it, and it was a blast. My first game, I ended up first place on my team. I might actually go back and do that for fun. I know War Thunder has a sim level. I'm not 100% sure what that entails, and it might be something I'll look at in the future, but the point of this video is to just take a look at the A-10. And War Thunder, I can't believe I'm saying this, you impressed me. I give it a...
Jurassic Park.
Up until relatively recently, MS Flight Sim only had one A-10 by the studio M Scenery. It was an A-10A, and oof, let me tell you, it sucked. Cockpit looked like absolute garbage. Thankfully, about 6 months ago, the developer Demos, who has an abundance of high-quality modules out, released their version of the Warthog, which is a C variant, and it is leaps and bounds above the old one in terms of quality. The cockpit looks immaculate, and it comes with several nice liveries. Since this is MS Flight Sim, there's no weapons, and the cannon has been replaced with the targeting pod, which is arguably more useful than
the General Electric Gal A-10 Avenger, 30mm hydraulically driven 7-barrel rotatory autocannon.
And on the shitty A version, there's just no cannon. There's 3 drop tanks which are optional, each matching the livery you pick. I prefer how it looks without them, honestly. It's a joy to fly. Weaving in and out of canyons with it is such a nice experience. It seems pretty on point to me, at least as far as MS Flight Sim allows. I will always appreciate this game for letting me take these aircraft anywhere in the world. If I'm ever feeling homesick, it's nice to fly around my hometown. And as far as the A-10C goes, I give it a...
See, here's the problem with this video series. I'm really going to have to be very careful about what aircraft I pick going forward. Because if said aircraft has a full fidelity module in DCS, it's going to win every time. The F-16, the FA-18, the F-4, F-14, AH-64, all of them. DCS just wins. Maybe that's why the F-35 was a good first pick, because the DCS mods just don't hit. But that's not the case here. This is as close to an A-10 as it gets. Mind you, this is the A-10C, not the A. The A is a much lower fidelity thing. But on the C, fully interactive cockpit, full flight model, full fidelity weapons, motherfuckers build full replica cockpits in their living rooms just so they can fly this plane in this game. Like, I know it's a meme that if you learn a plane in DCS, you could fly it for real. But shit, man, there's probably something to that. At a minimum, you could probably cold start it and get it in the air. I really don't have much to say on this one. You can't get better than this. If your wife's boyfriend bought you this module for Christmas, then congratulations, because you have the best A-10 in gaming. I know, that was pretty anticlimactic, but hey, that's DCS for you. Anyway, some closing thoughts about the old A-10 here. Military aircraft are generally marketed to other countries when in development or as they get phased out. 24 countries, for example, operate the F-16. 15 bought the F-35, and 7 the F-15. Only 4 ever bought the A-10. And hell, 11 got the F-104. That alone should be embarrassing for the hog. If you're a diehard A-10 fanboy, I hope you either learned something or you're malding in the comments. And if you guys send me anything from the Pogo Foundation, I will actually laugh at you. Anyway, if you watched this far, thank you. More of these are to come, and if you'd like to see those, please consider subscribing. If I missed anything or didn't mention your favorite A-10 game, go ahead and let me know in the comments. I do read every single one. But that's it for me. VTOL just got a new update, so I'm sure you can find me there. Otherwise, take care till the next one.
Jesus, you're still here? The video was over 5 minutes ago. Do you not have anything better to... You know what? Fine. Here's what the next one's going to be.